who are we really indebted to? Who do we really believe about ourselves? And this is part of the wonder of interracial folk, is that we are all deeply, consciously aware of the choices that we have to make all the time. As soon as we walk into a room, we understand people look at us, we look at them, we're going to work it out. And so whether I kind of turn my iPod, show people, the book I pull out, all of these they're very conscious decisions that I have to navigate. So for me, race is literally a negotiation. It is a process. I understand there's nothing natural about it. But the thing about race that's so sneaky is that for people who don't have that, they never, it is just what is natural to them. It's just how God, and then on top of that, you put on this layer of religiosity, and not only is it just who I am, it's natural, it's even blessed, it's who God made me to be. I wouldn't want to give up that. It's very sneaky business. That's a technical term.
Well, in fact, you call it, yeah. You start to unpack this idea of racial performance, and is that what you're getting at? Is that we have this, it's not racial preservation so much as it is, we really are racially performing.
Mm-hmm. Right, so racial performance is a term that's used in critical theory, and it's this idea that we have this kind of idea of what race is. And so what we do is we're literally like making decisions and choices to kind of live into that. So if you think of this, for instance, think of Facebook. Okay, this is a great example. Facebook is a perfect example of performativity. Sorry, somebody did not want me to drop that. It's the devil. I'm gonna give you all a word right now. But think about what you decide to put up and what you decide not to put up, right? You don't put up all your business. You put up certain things that you want people to know about who you are. This is racial performance. The idea that we kind of put forward certain things, but it becomes a very unconscious process, a kind of really subtle process that we all live into. And this is where the language of race as a form of discipleship comes in, that we're living into a certain pattern of life and then reproducing and calling others into it. So it's a kind of cyclical kind of thing.
And then the one comment I will make is how wonderful the book helps us get to the issue of discipleship. I read 100 books on race, written by some great people. But I think what's profound is your book actually leads us into a more profound discipleship, which is huge given what you just said about how we perform racially. The informed sense at which you speak to our identity as Christians that leads to a different discipleship, a more profound discipleship, a more mulatto discipleship, one in which my identity in Christ is as important, more important than my racial or ethnic identity without moving aside my racial or ethnic identity.
Ron, I guess my question, being a pastor, maybe you could unpack that last section about the discipleship portion. You're committed to a local church here. You've been committed to your local churches for a long time. Your wife has served in churches in many capacities. What are some practical suggestions that you would give all of us that hopefully are not just people that are enamored by big words and theology, but as we're committed to the local church, living it out with people that look like us, that don't look like us? What are some tangible things that maybe you can encourage us to engage with, maybe even right now in our thoughts?
I think the first part, so the structure of the book is structured actually around the baptismal liturgy. So the first is renunciation, confession, immersion. The first section being renunciation is important because before you go into the baptismal room, and these are the rites in the early church, before you went into the baptismal pool, what you did was you actually turned to the west and you renounced the devil, his pomp, and his works. And what that did is it suggested, wait a second, it's not just things that I did, but a way of being that I have to now think about differently. And so one of the really concrete things that I think is important is that we have to become more open to the possibilities that we're not thinking about. What I mean by that is if you go to the bookstore and you immediately go to that section, a really simple thing is to say, why not this section? So you get a choice between 3 books, Your Best Life Now, Woman Thou Art Loosed. Which one do you choose? Not that I'm recommending either one, but I'm sure they're wonderful books. But I'm just... So part of it is listening to our own inclinations, maybe even becoming a little bit suspicious of our own inclinations. In the same way that as when you first became a Christian and you were struggling with what to do, like, I can't do these bad things. Or you were doing something and a mentor, a discipler said, whoa, you can't be doing that kind of stuff. That's not part of what this new life is about. So part of discipleship is learning what faithfulness looks like, becoming self-reflective about our own kind of instincts and intuitions and habits. So it might mean going to a new section of the bookstore to be really... read James Weldon Johnson's autobiography of an ex-colored man. This is the thing. African American history is American history. White folk in the United States cannot understand themselves without reading African American history. I would say this is the first one. It's really simple. You don't even have to talk to anybody. Begin to understand how African American history developed, what African American experience was like, and how it was always tied to white life. Then think a little bit about how your own life is tied or not tied to people who are different. One thing that was really interesting and really sad to me last year, not to call out Quest, but in a group that I was a part of, discipling, it was really interesting to me to see how many white people had never heard the stories of alienation from their Asian American friends. They had been friends for years in the church and never understood the depth of alienation that they felt. So if you have friends that are different, I would ask those difficult questions. What does it mean for you to be this in the world? And then be open to the possibility they might say, cool. Really interesting. And so allow every single person to give you a different answer. Everyone doesn't have the same answer. But allow everyone to speak a new answer. Then begin to ask yourself, why do I not have those sensibilities? Where are those gaps in my own life? Might be a beginning. And it's going to be different for everyone in the same way that everyone's path of discipleship is slightly different.
Hey, let's go ahead and deepen our conversation together. Kanisha and we've got 2 people with microphones here. And we're going to go for about 20 minutes or so. And so if you guys have some questions, you can go ahead and just raise your hand, and folks will come up and hand these microphones to you. And don't be shy. Let's make Brian feel a little uncomfortable today because he's enjoying himself too much here. All right? So... go ahead and raise your hand, and we'll get the microphones to you. Great. And if you could introduce yourself, that would be absolutely great.
Oh, no, I missed it. Hey. Hi, Dr. Bantom. My name is Katina. Hello, everyone. Here.
And could you stand? Would that be okay?
I'm going to stand?
Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
I'll stand right here. All right. Wow. Okay, so earlier you spoke about kind of the assertion of race, I am African American, I am Asian American. Can you talk, or what's your take on assimilation for those who, because of how our society is, they want to deny who they are if they are non-white, or even if, whether you're multiracial or 100%, from whatever it is, but that desire to want to assimilate into white culture because they want more opportunity or popularity or whatever. But I just wanted to see what your take was on that. Thank you.
Yeah, this is a great question. The question of assimilation is a really, really hard one because I think if there's one thing that we can take from and draw from mulatto folks, from interracial folks, is that none of our stories are the same. None of us have the same story. It depends on the curl of your hair, where you grew up, whether you grew up with your mother or your father, what neighborhood.